So in this video, we are going to talk about humanistic therapy. So first of all, we need to talk about what humanism is. The humanistic perspective in psychology emphasizes human potential, self-awareness, and the freedom of choice. Humanistic psychologists contend that the most important factor in personality is the individual's conscious, subjective perception of his or herself. They see people as being innately good and motivated by the need to grow psychologically. If people are raised in a genuinely accepting atmosphere and given freedom to make choices, they will develop healthy self-concepts and strive to fulfill their unique potential as human beings. So client-centered therapy. The most influential of the humanistic psychotherapies is called client-centered therapy. Sometimes it's also referred to as person-centered therapy. This was developed by Carl Rogers. In client-centered therapy, the therapist is non-directive and reflexive, and the client directs the focus of each therapy session. In naming his therapy, Rogers deliberately used the word client rather than patient because he believed that the medical term patient implied that people in therapy were sick and were seeking treatment from an all-knowing authority figure who could heal or cure them. Instead of stressing the therapist's expertise or perceptions of the client, patient-centered therapy emphasizes the client's subjective perception of himself or herself in his or her environment. Rogers saw the therapeutic relationship as the catalyst that leads to insight and lasting personality change. Unlike Freud, however, Rogers viewed the nature of this relationship very differently. Rogers believed that the therapist should not exert power by offering those carefully timed interpretations of the patient's unconscious conflicts. He advocated just the opposite, that the therapist should be non-directive. The role of the therapist is to create the conditions that allow the client, not the therapist, to direct the focus of therapy. 3 qualities of therapists are necessary: genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and empathetic understanding. Genuineness means that the therapist honestly and openly shares his or her thoughts and feelings with the client. By modeling genuineness, the therapist indirectly encourages the client to exercise this capacity more fully in himself or herself. The therapist must value, accept, and care for the client, whatever the problems or behavior might be. This is called unconditional positive regard. Rogers believed that people develop psychological problems largely because they have consistently experienced only conditional acceptance from people like parents, teachers, or others who have communicated this message to the client. I will only accept you if you conform to my expectations. Because the acceptance by significant others has been conditional, the person may think and behave in unhealthy and unproductive ways. The therapist who can create a climate of unconditional positive regard fosters the person's natural tendency to move towards self-fulfilling decisions without fear of evaluation or rejection. The therapist must also communicate empathetic understanding by reflecting the content and personal meaning of the feelings being experienced by the client. The therapist creates a psychological mirror, reflecting the client's thoughts and feelings as they exist in the client's private inner world. The goal is to help the client begin to see himself or herself and his or her problems more clearly. Rogers believed when the therapeutic atmosphere contains genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and empathetic understanding, change is more likely to occur. These conditions can foster feelings of being psychologically safe, accepted, and valued. In this therapeutic atmosphere, change occurs as the person's self-concept and worldview gradually becomes healthier and less distorted. The client then moves in the direction of self-actualization, the realization of his or her unique potentials and talents. Motivational interviewing. Client-centered therapy has evolved and adapted to changing times. One such evolution is the development of motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is the technique designed to help clients overcome the mixed feelings or reluctance they may have about committing to change. Motivational interviewing is used for a wide range of psychological problems. It's been applied to addictions such as substance use disorder or gambling. It has also been applied to techniques to improve health, such as through diet or exercise. Usually only lasting a session or two, motivational interviewing is more directive than the techniques used in traditional client-centered therapy. The main goal is to encourage and strengthen the client's self-motivating statements or change talk. These are expressions of the client's needs, desires, and reasons for change. Using a client-centered approach, the therapist responds with empathetic understanding and reflective listening, helping the client explore his or her own values and motivations for change. The client-centered approach has been applied to group therapy, marital counseling, parenting, education, business, and even community and international relations.